Christmas has always been a big deal in my family. Every year, we gathered at my grandparents' house, an old Victorian home that seemed built for the season. Its creaky wooden floors, warm fireplace, and heavy scent of pine made it feel timeless. It was the kind of house where, no matter how many years passed, it felt frozen in a perfect, comforting Christmas memory. Last year was different, though. It was the first Christmas without Grandma. She had passed in November, and the family decided to keep the tradition going anyway. She would have wanted that, my mom said, wiping her eyes. So on December 24th, we piled into the house. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. We all tried our best to keep the holiday spirit alive. I spent the evening drinking cocoa with my younger cousin, Emma, a curious 9-year-old with an imagination that could make anyone believe in magic. As the night wore on, the house grew quieter. Around midnight, everyone retired to their rooms. I was given the room at the end of the hallway, Grandma's old room. I wasn't thrilled about sleeping there. Felt wrong. The bed, the old rocking chair in the corner, and the faded wallpaper. Everything smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. I tried not to think about it, though. I slipped into the bed, turning off the lamp beside me, and stared at the ceiling. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I woke up. I don't know what startled me, but I suddenly felt wide awake. The room was cold, the kind of cold that settles deep into your bones. My breath fogged in the air as I sat up. I glanced at the window, expecting to see it open, but it was locked tight. Then I noticed something. The rocking chair in the corner. It was moving, back and forth, slowly. The floorboards didn't creak, and there was no sound. Just the faint motion of the chair gliding rhythmically. I blinked, thinking maybe I was still half asleep. But no, it was moving. Then I saw her. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but in the dim light, a figure appeared sitting in the chair. It was a woman, her head tilted slightly, her hands resting gently on the arms of the chair. I couldn't see her face, but her hair, thin and gray, looked just like Grandma's. "Grandma," I whispered. The figure didn't move. The chair rocked a little faster. I felt frozen. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get out of the room, but I couldn't move. My eyes stayed locked on the figure. Slowly, its head began to turn toward me. I didn't want to see her face, but I couldn't look away. The moment her face came into view, the room seemed to shudder. Her skin was pale, stretched too tight. Her lips cracked into a grim, unnatural smile. But her eyes, those hollow, dark pits, stared straight through me. "Go back to bed," she said. Her voice wasn't Grandma's. It was raspy and broken, like dry leaves crunching underfoot. I felt tears spill down my cheeks as the figure began to rise from the chair. It moved too slowly, like it was dragging itself against gravity. Without thinking, I bolted. I grabbed the doorknob and yanked it open, running down the hallway to the living room. My parents and uncle were already there, confused and groggy. "What's wrong?" my mom asked. I tried to explain, my voice trembling. My dad, half skeptical, went to check the room. When he came back, he looked pale. "The chair is moving," he said, his voice tight. "On its own." That was all he said before we grabbed our coats and left the house. The next morning, we returned in the daylight to pack our things. Everything seemed normal except for one thing. On the nightstand in Grandma's room was a photo. It hadn't been there before. It was an old Christmas picture of Grandma, smiling warmly, surrounded by the family. But as I picked it up, I noticed something chilling. In the corner of the photo, near the rocking chair, was a dark figure, a shadowy silhouette with hollow eyes, staring straight at the camera. We haven't been back to the house since. Every Christmas, I think about that rocking chair, about Grandma, and about the thing that sat where she used to sit. And every Christmas Eve, I hear a faint creak of wood, somewhere in the distance, like a chair rocking in the night. It started with the snowfall. Thick and heavy, it blanketed the streets, muffling the world into silence. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in years, I was spending it alone. My family had canceled their visit because of the storm, leaving me with nothing but a frozen turkey dinner and a bottle of cheap wine. I live in an old, creaky house on the outskirts of town. It's the kind of place that looks charming in daylight but eerie once the sun sets. The wind howled against the windows, and I sat on the couch, half watching some holiday movie when I heard it. 3 soft knocks on my front door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Who would be out here in this storm? I walked to the door, hesitant, and peeked through the peephole. A man stood there. He was bundled in a thick coat and scarf, his face obscured by the snow whipping around him. "Can I help you?" I called out without opening the door. His voice was muffled but desperate. "Please, I need to come in. My car broke down. It's freezing out here." I hesitated. I wasn't the type to let strangers in, but something in his voice sounded so sad. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the door and cracked it open. The man slipped inside before I could say anything, dragging a blast of icy air with him. He stood in my hallway, shaking snow from his coat. He was tall, almost unnaturally so, and his face, now visible, looked gaunt and pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an immediate sense of unease. "Thank you," he said softly. "You saved me." I forced a smile. "No problem. Can I get you something warm?" He nodded, still staring. "Tea would be nice." I hurried into the kitchen, trying to shake the tension crawling up my spine. I didn't like the way he looked at me. I made the tea, and when I turned back to the living room, he was gone. The room was empty. "Hello," I called out nervously. No answer. I walked through the house, my heart pounding. Every light was on, yet the shadows seemed deeper. I finally found him in the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, standing in the corner, facing the wall. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shouted. Slowly, he turned. His face was wrong now, stretched, as if something inside him was pulling at his skin. His smile widened far too much, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. "You shouldn't have let me in," he whispered. The lights flickered. My breath caught as the temperature plummeted. I stumbled backward, but he didn't move. Instead, his head tilted unnaturally, like a puppet's, and he began humming Silent Night. I ran. I didn't stop to grab my coat or shoes. I burst out into the snowstorm, the freezing wind biting at my skin. Behind me, I could still hear the humming growing louder, as if it were coming from the very walls of my house. When I finally reached the neighbor's porch, I pounded on their door. They let me in, panicked at my appearance. I told them everything, how I'd let a man in and how he wasn't human. They exchanged a look I couldn't read before the husband spoke. "There's no man here," he said carefully. "No footprints in the snow. You're the only one we've seen all night." I turned and looked out their window. My house sat there, quiet and still, the lights flickering through the storm. And then I saw him, standing in the upstairs window, staring at me, his grin stretching impossibly wide. The police searched my house the next morning. They found no signs of anyone, but they did find something strange. On the frost-covered window, where I'd seen him, were handprints. Dozens of them, small and large, pressed into the glass from the inside. I haven't been back since. And every Christmas Eve, I swear I can hear that humming outside my window. Silent night, holy night,